Yellow. Hey, it's Wesley?
Charlie.
Nah, it's Richie. It's not Charlie, it's Richie.
You ever play roulette?
I haven't played roulette. No, I haven't played roulette. I played poker a couple of times. What's the reason?
Well, let me give you a word of advice.
Always bet on black.
Okay, always bet on black. Thanks for the advice. We'll take that into consideration. Alright. Yes. It's your man Richie Rich making a regresso. Guys, it's that time again for another retrospective review. I don't know what it is. There must be something tingling in the air, you know. Why is it that I keep returning back to the Wesley Snipes canon of films? You know, could it be that he was one of the best, like, profitable top actors of the 90s? Maybe it could be, but for whatever reason, I seem to be in the Wesley Snipes season. So in this one, folks, we actually go in between New Jack City and also Sugar Hill, an action thriller, and pretty much Wesley Snipes' like first hit in the action genre. It can only possibly be Passenger 57 that came out in 1992. Hey guys, before we dive into this video, definitely check me out on social media. All my links will be down in the description below. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. You know what to do. With that being said, let's get on to this video. Passenger 57, which came out in 1992. Wesley Snipes at this time, really when the 90s hit, he was without question one of the biggest stars, not even just in black cinemas, in all pretty much of entertainment. Wesley Snipes was at the top of his game. It was the peak, and he led like a very great path into upcoming actors. It's really cool to go back and see Wesley in this prime. Passenger 57, what's interesting about this film opposed from like his earliest, because this was released the same time as another great Wesley Snipes film, White Man Can't Jump, which came out in 1992. This is very different from his roles earlier, because this one was the first action version, and before this, a lot of people didn't know Wesley Snipes was a martial arts practitioner. He had studied martial arts since he was 10 years old, and this was the first film he really got to showcase this, because before that he appeared in Michael Jackson's Bad Video. In the in the scenes, he was the Sporting Knights in Kingsley, New York, New Jack City, of course. White Man Can't Jump and Jungle Fever were more like that kind of dramatic side of Wesley Snipes you saw. Very different characters from all those films I mentioned, but it was more of like a sensitive, emotional, dramatic side, which you later got to see in Sugar Hill. But Passenger 57 was the first one that showed his action side. At this time, action stars were really getting pushed on the forefront. At this time, you had Steven Seagal, known for like Under Siege, Marked for Death, Above the Law, Out for Justice, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Universal Soldier, Nowhere to Run, Hard Target. He was killing it. And then you had the ones who were previously, killing it in the 80s. Sylvester Stallone, of course, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, who pretty much were the main, go-to action stars. So, while we're there, Wesley Snipes really demonstrated his martial arts skills, because he was already like a great, fantastic actor. Then to see him in his action roles, action version, it was nice because he can now play a different type of version of films, which some of the other actors could not possibly do. So it was excellent to see him in this. If I go back, to seeing this for the first time, this one's very strange, because up until like recently, I've not seen Passenger 7 fully. Passenger 57 from beginning to the end. Before, when I watched this, I always saw bits. Never really saw the beginning so much. When you see the main antagonist, which I'll talk about later, him in the intro, and then seeing like seeing like the main centerpiece of the film that takes on the plane, even the scenes, in the climax, the final battle. So I always saw snippets. I always saw bits of this film, and only till this last couple of weeks ago, I was able to see this film, fully, and I really, really, enjoyed it. Wesley Snipes, he's in the lead, pretty much like a lot of his films in the 90s. He was even the lead or the co-lead in most of his films, and Wesley really brings a badass to this role, and it's really fun. For what I'm going to speak about later is Wesley's one-liners. This was a common trait of a lot of the action stars, was their one-liners they would hit, and Wesley Snipes hits a one-liner that he hits all the way out of the park, which is great. So Wesley, at this time, he was in fantastic form. The main antagonist of this film is played by Bruce Payne, English actor. He's playing Charles Rain. You could say basically a terrorist. Pretty much an international, he's this British terrorist who has escaped law enforcement for a while. And the story goes, he's basically getting transferred from this plane that just so happens to have Wesley Snipes' character, who's John Cutter, just so happens to be on that flight, and he's getting transferred to another facility, another prison. So he's basically there as he's a convict. He's a worst on the plane. So how they basically, Charles Rain in this, he really plays such a sophisticated British role. And people gotta know, at this time, Die Hard, that blew up in 1998, was such a phenomenal success, and you could say really was a game changer. Because of the first Die Hard, you had a whole slew of copycats. You had this, Passenger 57, Under Siege, which I talked about, Steven Seagal, which was released at this time. They called it Die Hard on the ship, and Passenger 50, Die Hard on the plane. Speed in 1994 with Keanu Reeves, which I think is probably the best of the Die Hard clones, I would say. And you also had a Sudden Death with Jean-Claude Van Damme that came out in the mid-90s, which this one is in an ice hockey arena, So those are pretty much the most notable Die Hard clones. And as I said, I think Speed definitely was the best of them, but Die Hard really influenced a lot of these films. And again, it's like I said, you have this, but it's with Wesley Snipes' kind of personality, which makes this film work. And while I mentioned as Bruce Payne, you can definitely tell it's influenced by Alan Rickman playing the Gruber in the first Die Hard film. It's the English guy who is very cynical. He's not taking any BS and just straight to the point. He's a madman, but he's controlled insanity, which Bruce Payne really delivers into the part of playing Charles. Supporting cast, you got the face. You got Alice Thatcher, who I never seen this Nubian queen. She's Alice Thatcher, who she's the flight attendant. She's a stewardess, and you first encounter her where the role that Wesley is assigned, John Cutter is assigned to, he's basically doing preparations for if a terrorist was to come on, or some kind of plane hijacker. What can you do in this predicament? So they do kind of role play activities. That's when you see her for the first time, kind of getting in John Cutter's face. And yeah, she's really cool. She does very well, for a part, very similar to how, if you see a film I'll talk about later, Executive Decision, Halle Berry's role in that, similar of the hot black, actress, the hot black stewardess, on the plane, which is amazing. And again, not too much chemistry between, the film really works on a cat and mouse. It's Wesley trying to chase Bruce Payne most of the time, so not too much scenes or intimate scenes between the hero of the story, Wesley, Alex, and not too much scenes, but she does pretty alright. And you have Tom Sizemore, who you've seen in Heat. He was in Strange Days. He was in Devil in a Blue Dress. a really cool actor. You see in a lot of the '90s films. This is probably one of like his first earlier roles. And it was nice to see him as a good guy, because most of the times I've seen Tom Sizemore in his films, it's always like he's either the bad guy or he's affiliated, even in Enemy of the State. When I saw him in that, oh God, Tom, what's going on? But he acts as like he's someone who's known John Cutter. Tom Sizemore plays Sly. Maybe for Sylvester Stallone, and he plays like he's known Wesley. He actually helps him to get that position on the same plane that's carrying Charles Rain. To that next place, that next prison. So they're like confidants. They've known cool each other, and he always kind of gets jealous of like all these girls kind of forward themselves to John Cutter. And there's a cool scene when they're going for security, and you got this black chick who's doing like a scan on that, and she basically gives him, opens him, basically gives him like an offer, and so he does really cool. You also have Bruce Greenwood, who this is probably one of the first early appearances I've seen of him. He's here. You have Elizabeth Hurley. This is a young Elizabeth Hurley. I think she just started modeling around the time. She plays Charles Rains, like you could say second in command, one of like the henchmen that's on board. She's a stewardess at the beginning, and she later takes control on board on the plane with everyone. Like one of the early scenes which is John Cutter's, possibly why the reason he's personally serious is like serious in this is, early scenes in this, it shows a flashback of like John Cutter's like a girlfriend being shot because of like a mugger, in like a 7-Eleven or like them kind of supermarket stores. And that's the reason it's serious, and they actually put this in black and white, and it cuts away to showing like Wesley John Cutter like on the pad work, and he's demonstrating his martial arts ability, which is fantastic. So he does a great job. The whole story really centers around John Cutter, who is now he was working on like law enforcement. He's in the police game. But then once his girlfriend dies, that's shown in like a flashback. He's put in as like a kind of airport training securities for a threat of a terrorist or like a plane hijack. So he's showing most of these people aboarding the flights, if they want to come to this kind of workshop, what you can do if a plane is hijacked. And you could see he's actually tired of it. Tom Sizemore Sly, he's saying like, well, this is just for now. I'm going to give you a better position. And midway, you get a better position. And this leads on to him getting a meeting with Bruce Greenwood and Bruce Greenwood's character. And they actually have the position for like an anti-terrorism, like he can be now in charge, So once they actually have that meeting with Bruce Greenwood, Tom Sizemore, that's from Tom Sizemore, he actually accepts, and just so happens he's gonna be there. He's actually on the flight when they're taking Charles, And what it is, Charles Rain, he's someone, as I said, he's escaped the government for a long time, and when you're introduced to him, he's actually trying to get reconstructive surgery so he can change his face to like beat the cops trying to get him. And it just so happens when it's very tense scene, they're about to do surgery, and he says, "Don't put anesthetic, I can take it." He's always checking the time, and once he checks the times, he knows that the cops, the FBI, the ones who are trailing him, they're gonna raid him. So he takes out the surgeons, he escapes, but they actually catch him, and once they nab him, they set plans to transfer him on the plane, which just so happens to have John Cutter on board. Where the title comes on this film is that Wesley Snipes is actually the 57th passenger to board this flight. And once he comes on, he actually, just by coincidence, he meets a student, Maya, Alex, who they were doing the workshops earlier. They meet on the flight, little exchange, but nothing serious. And Wesley John Cutter, he's just on the flight. And then once they actually, fly up and, and they're, in the sky, that's when Charles Rain and his crew of henchmen, they take hold of the flight. And once they're in there, that's when John Cutter, who is aware of this, he has to basically take charge of this, terrorist act, and you get into this real cool sequences on the plane. So when it's taken off, Charles Rain, Bruce Payne, really shows how sadistic he is. There's a scene where he's got one like sort of hostage, and Wesley has one of the henchmen, and Charles actually asks the gentleman like, "Oh, do you have a family?" And he says he's married and he's killed, and he shoots him point blank. And this even brings back memories, flashbacks of when John Carter, Wesley, could not save his girlfriend, his partner that time in the robbery, and he knows he's dealing with this crazy sadistic guy. So when they're on board of the plane, Wesley is taking like a few henchmen down. He goes like underneath where they're on board the flight where the passengers are. He goes kind of go underneath where the cargo is, and he's taking down henchman after henchman until they can actually land. He goes down with Maya. He goes down with Marty. I said Maya, Marty. And once he goes down, you get that incredible scene of where John Carter, he's fighting like one of the henchmen. His henchman, he was like trying to trick him. And Wesley, again, you've seen his martial arts skills. He's trained in combat. And you get a cool scene where they're on the phone. And Wesley says the famous line, always bet on black. It is amazing. And when John Carter is down, down in the cargo, his plan is to empty the fuel. So Bruce Payne has to actually tell the pilots that they're gonna land. So he actually lands. He actually drains the fuel. He takes it out of the plane. Once the plane is slowly heading down, they've already told one of the flight stations okay, we need to land. They told them, they announced okay, this plane's going to be suddenly landing. John Carter actually gets kicked out by one of their henchmen, and he lands on the where the planes, the landing zone. And what happens is you have this redneck, you have this cop who displays personalities of like the stereotypical kind of redneck, boy, and he meets Wesley, and already he's there, and he meets John Carter, and he's just already like, he doesn't believe he's a cop. He believes he's like working on the plane. He's working as a terrorist, especially with the conversation with Charles Rain. And you can clearly see that even though Wesley, John Carter was law enforcement, there was still that kind of black white thing, which I'll talk a bit much more about later. But as he comes down, he explains to these lot what's going on in the plane. Don't heed to this man. This guy can't be trusted. The terrorist. And it's only until one of the guys who has worked with John Carter before, who's Brian Hook's dad. But Hooks comes in, and he basically tells no, I know John Carter. He knows he's a good guy. I know John Carter. He is a top official in federal. He's a top police. He's a top guy. Why are you doing this to him? And he just basically reprimands him, and he's able to go. Basically, John Carter is able to get away from that. The sheriffs, the ones who were thinking he was part of the terrorists on the plane. He's able to kind of get into he's able to battle Charles Rain. He actually takes down one of his henchmen, and then after that, the police come. And you really get cool scenes of an interrogation of, the lead, the protagonist and the antagonist, John Carter and Charles Rain. And it's a cool interrogation where Bruce is, Wesley's told, John Carter is telling him okay, what are your plans? He's trying to get inside of his head of his madman. And Charles Rain is talking about I do this because the world is an ecological balance. There's reasons to this insanity. He talks about how this world isn't fair. He makes a reference to the tensions between black and white culture. It's cool. And Wesley, John Carter, he loses his temper and brings him up, and he says you better stop it. Kind of whack your ass all around. Such a 90s quote, and really, really cool chilling scenes. And they basically comply that Charles Rain is allowed on board because he was gonna instruct his henchmen to basically take out every passenger every minute. every minute. So Wesley basically says, Wesley basically tells all the law enforcement that if you let him in there, he's gonna kill them anyway. No matter what, if he flies up with them, he will find a way. So they let Charles Rain back on board. They had the sharpshooter, but one of Charles Rain's sharpshooters was actually on their board taking out the law enforcement. So he goes on board. The plane takes off, but just about it's on the freeway, just on the running way, on the way just to take off. Wesley Snipes is actually getting driven there by that stereotypical cop, and he actually boards the plane again. So he's you get round 2 of going on this plane again. So as they head back up, they don't know that John Carter Wesley is back on board the flight. He's not on board. They don't know. Wesley does his best, to take out some of the henchmen from the cargo until he can go all the way back up to the deck. And then he engages in a final kind of showdown with Charles Payne, and it's it's cool because you don't really see too much fights especially how tight space is, in business class, of course. And successfully he's able to defeat Charles Rain. He's able to hit him whilst it's 30,000 feet in the air, and Charles Rain falls to demise. And the whole time Tom Sizemore is there. He's losing his mind. What's happening to his body. And really warm scenes of when you get back, when they land safely, everyone is safe. And Alex and John Carter, they kind of walk into the distance, and Wesley Snipes saying, "I need a vacation." It's done. And it's I'm not sure what happens to Alex and Murty, and John Carter, Wesley and Alex. Alex waves things, they wipe up, and it's they recline. So the soundtrack of this movie was done by Stanley Clarke. And this film really, one thing I love with this film particular, one thing I love with this film in particularly is it complements the actors and the movie, and also the time, by inserting a lot of jazz and the saxophone, type of score in this movie. They're one of the real scenes I really appreciate for this film is when Wesley Snipes driving, it possibly is a Corvette, on the nice sunny streets of, I'm guessing it's possibly Atlanta, or that part. He's driving to go meet Tom Sizemore and Bruce Greenwood's characters, and just that saxophone that's playing in the background, it really is a presentation of how the 90s were, blending a lot of that jazz and saxophone, the soul, and that type of music. And even from the intro, when you see that cool intro, and it shows Passenger 57, very similar to even the cue that was seen in Ricochet from Denzel Washington. And yeah, the music is really complements the time, and I just love it as well because the music is taken seriously, especially because it is a serious thing, to talk about terrorism and that. They're on the flight, even when they're in the carnival, that exchange, when they're down, Charles Rain versus John Carter in the carnival. The music changes from there, and it also changes when they're on board the flight, and it really echoes suspense. When the terrorists take charge of the plane, even when you can see John Carter is trying to maneuver his way around the plane, when he gets caught by the police at the end, and even the final climax battle. So all the soundtrack is put correctly for which party is in the scene, which is fantastic. One thing I love with this movie a lot is the references. This was at the time when Arsenio Hall was one of the biggest, not even just talk show hosts, but he really went into pop culture. And especially for anyone who is not even just black, but is an ethnic background, they know how big of a deal Arsenio Hall was. And I was so cool at when first John Carter actually comes on board the plane. There's this old lady who beside him, and she actually mistakes him for Arsenio Hall. It's I watch your show all the time. Wait till I tell my family who I'll see next to you. Woo, woo, woo. Obviously, woo. Even when John Carter Wesley goes to the toilet, he's like, man, I can't believe this. First this Arsenio Hall shit. Now this, which is another even reference to Die Hard 2 with Bruce Willis, where Bruce Willis in Die Hard 2 says, "How can the same shit happen to the same guy twice?" So the Passenger 57 is a very this film came out at a time really due to the impact of Die Hard being an isolated area. Because if you look at Die Hard, he's in the Nakatomi Plaza. Passenger 57, he's in the airplane. They do go into the carnival, but let's say most part of it takes in the plane, under siege of ship, speed the bus, Passenger 7, sudden death in the hockey arena. So that was the whole thing with Die Hard, is we're gonna make this so suspenseful. It's one guy who's gonna take all these kind of elite terrorists, take these terrorists and take out the elite guy who's controlling all of this, without heeding into the demands, which is great. And what the cool thing is, we've seen Wesley Snipes in his first pretty much big action picture. He brings in a lot of his personality and his character in this that distinguishes it from the other Die Hard copycats. It is Passenger 57 is a good film. It's very quick. It's only like 1 hour and 20 minutes. Some people could see the dialogue is cheesy, like always better black. If you gotta go, you gotta go. Even in the ending scenes, where like he's walking, with the stewardess, Alex character, into the, you could say in the sunset, even though it's night, so you could have that kind of like 90s cheese. So some people could see it doesn't hold up as well. So it doesn't hold up as well as like the other films, but I think it's like it's a decent film. And again, it's like, if we didn't get this film, maybe you don't see Wesley Snipes in Blade, because with this, I'm pretty sure when they see like Wesley Snipes can hold his own. He has his he has his discipline, in martial arts. Maybe you don't see him in Blade and his other, action, films. There was no copying Wesley Snipes. At this time when he broke out, he was completely original. Even though the movie had a lot of influences, Wesley Snipes was completely original, and I think that's what really contributed to his popularity rising, because he was the lead in for many films, which I do hope to cover in the future. So yeah, guys, man, that's my review on 992's action, suspense, film, terrorism, film, you want to call it, Passenger 57. Yeah, let me know what you think of this movie that came out. Wesley's like pretty much first action picture. The Warner Brothers actually done this. Let me know what you did know about this. Let me know what you think about just Wesley Snipes, in general. Especially from his other, roles at the peak of his power. Yes, really appreciate you watching this review. And yes, make sure you always bet on, take care.